Genesis 45. Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him, while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. So I don't know if the Egyptians were circumcised, but as proof, it's possible that Joseph showed that he was circumcised, or he just made himself known by telling the whole story or relaying the story of what happened to him. Not sure there. And Joseph wept aloud, and the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. So it doesn't mean that he wept so loud that it went all the way to Pharaoh. It's like he wept, and those people that heard him, that he put outside of the room or outside of the house, they heard it, and obviously word spread quickly throughout Egypt and especially to Pharaoh, because Joseph is regarded as Pharaoh, just second in command in running the country. Remember, he was given that authority. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life." Isn't it amazing how Joseph looks at what happened to him and says, this is God's will. It's not what you did, it's actually God's ordained purpose. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity or remnant for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So again, Joseph says, God sent me, and a sent one is actually an apostle. So Joseph is saying, God sent me as an apostle, and what does an apostle do? He establishes, he breaks open, and then basically he teaches and testifies. How? By preaching, but through deeds. In other words, your conduct, how you are, and then what you say. And obviously that brings salvation. Verse 8. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh. Look at that, eh? In other words, I'm like a counselor, like a father to Pharaoh, because obviously the wisdom of God is in Joseph. And Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. So there Joseph declares the status and the position and the authority he has, which has been given by Pharaoh. Hurry and go up to your father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Do not tarry or don't delay. Verse 10. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. Therefore I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. And behold, the eyes of my brother Benjamin see, it is my mouth that speaks to you. In other words, it's really me that is talking to you. Your eyes can see me. Verse 13. So you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that you have seen, and you shall hurry and bring my father down here. Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. In other words, he was showing that he doesn't hold a grudge, and he was reconciling them to himself. And after that, his brothers talked with him. So you can imagine the conversation there, just sharing what happened, and obviously them coming possibly to a place of sorrow or being repentive of what they had done. Verse 16. Now the report of it was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, Say to your brothers, do this. Now we're going to see what Pharaoh is going to say to Joseph's brothers. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart. Go to the land of Canaan. Then bring your father and your households, in other words, your families as well, and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. And that's all because of what Joseph has done for Pharaoh in the land of Egypt and for the people, by interpreting those dreams, being wise in storing up the grain, and now 2 years into the famine, they are still well and nourishing, and the world is coming to them. Verse 19. Now you are commanded, so now he commands them, do this, take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives. In other words, he's sending transport now, take a bus. Bring your father and come. And do not be concerned about your goods. In other words, if there's anything that you can't transport down, don't worry, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Then the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for their journey. He gave to all of them, to each man, changes of garments. But to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. So again, there's prophetic significance here. 5 speaking of grace and things like that. And he sent to his father these things: 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. So he sent his brothers away, and they departed. And he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. In other words, don't now get into a morbid state, regret and all this. What's happened is happened. I'm just so glad we reconciled, and I go fetch my father, bring your families down. You can imagine how Joseph's heart is rejoicing. Verse 25. Then they went up out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan, to Jacob their father. And then they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. Now here's like the first heart attack I read about. And Jacob's heart stood still, because he did not believe them. Can you imagine the shock? Here you're thinking for all these years that your son is lost, wild beasts have taken him, wild animals have taken him, all that's left was his cloak bloodied. Now you're told, no, your son is alive and is in Egypt. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to him, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. In other words, you got like when you put those things on to restart your heart. Then Israel said, it is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die.